All right, welcome. We are here with Colette for 4 practices to grow connection during challenging times. Colette Pellissier is Chief Evolution Officer of Illuminated Leadership, a leadership development consultancy. Colette helps professionals upskill for the future of work and supports leaders at all levels in bridging awareness of their broader purpose with a purpose inherent in their career choices and their organizational role. Thank you for being with us, and I hand it over.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you so much for the warm welcome, and it is my delight to be here with you tonight to talk about this space of connection, and particularly through the lens of the language of love. And so for the next few minutes, we will spend some time talking about how we communicate with each other. But before we do that, let's explore connection and what the meaning of connection might be, because it's broad territory, isn't it? So I love Brené Brown, what she has to say. The definition of connection that she offers is that it's the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued, when they can give and receive without judgment, and when they derive sustenance and strength from the relationship. And so this feels like a beautiful doorway for us to walk through. You know, it dawns on me that if your definition of connection is perhaps more existential than this, that you'll still find gems in the conversation tonight. And so, you know, one of the ways that we connect with each other every day, all day long, is through communication. And so I thought we could talk tonight about how communication practices, really simple communication practices, can deepen our sense of connection with ourselves, with each other, with our lives. Okay? So communication, that seems like that would be easy enough, right? Because we do it all the time. But George Bernard Shaw says, this great quote, "The single biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it's taking place." Right? So it seems like it might be simple enough, and yet there are a number of things that can interfere with the quality of our communication. So what might that be? Well, disconnected is an image that I created for a social media post, I don't know, months ago, and it seems fitting right now that, you know, on a good day it might feel that connection is a little bit elusive. This might be a scene from a local restaurant, or maybe from a dinner table at a home near you, but where we get distracted by our devices, by multiple competing priorities that we might need to attend to. If you think about what's happened in the last few months, our homes have become our gyms, our offices, our schools, our spas, our churches, our restaurants, right? So lots of things going on at home that even though we're all in the same space, we might not feel or experience the same level of connection. So that's under normal times, and the times we're in right now, where this is about how to connect in challenging times, right? We've got COVID, we've got election stuff, we've got what's going on with the economy, global warming, what's happening to my job, are the kids safe when they go back and forth to school? So it's no wonder that we might feel frazzled, especially after being exposed for many months to a level of kind of stress or anxiety. And what happens to our bodies, we have this mechanism inside of us that when we're stressed, that it redirects all of our resources to kind of survival mechanisms. So fight or flight or freeze, right? So this is the situation that we find ourselves in, and if we just recognize and normalize, like if we're having trouble connecting during difficult times, there are lots of perfectly good reasons why. And the good news is we're also wired for connection. We're wired for love and belonging, for feeling like we are connected to the other people in our lives, like we have loving relationships with others, and companionship, right, and connection. So what happens during challenging times is sometimes we forget. We forget that our birthright is to feel this way, and we just need to remind ourselves that if conscious creation, we want to be creating from a conscious place, that conscious connection is a way of being that we can all aspire to, and even that conscious communication is a doorway for all of the above. So what we're going to spend the next few minutes talking about with that as our backdrop are some communication principles and some simple practices that you can work with to actually deepen your sense of connection. Okay, so the first principle is, okay, conscious communication actually asks for us to be sharing, interacting from a place of awareness. That's what consciousness is a sense of awareness. And it seems like that would be maybe easy to do, but here's what we're working with. What we've discovered, and this is scientific studies, psychological studies, that we're only actually aware of about 5% of what motivates us. 95%, and sometimes some people say up to 98% of what motivates us, what informs how we respond or how we react, we have no idea. It's completely invisible to us. And so any action that we take that helps us develop awareness will actually lower that water level so that we're more and more aware and we can be more and more conscious in our connection with other people. So the practice here is to learn to become a neutral observer. Remember, free from judgment. And this starts inside of us, where we can notice how we're showing up in a conversation, for example. And, you know, we have signals before we react. We have signals that can clue us about our level of responsiveness and resourcefulness. And so think about like a conversation with a loved one that maybe is challenged, and you start to feel your shoulders tighten up, and you feel a pit in your stomach, you feel that headache coming on, or gosh, I wonder how quickly this conversation will be completed. These are all clues that something's operating inside. And so the sooner you can catch that and just notice neutrally what's going on with you, you find yourself in choice. And conscious communication asks for us to just be in choice, being responsive rather than reactive. Okay? So connection principle number 1, learn to become a neutral observer. Okay? Second principle is, okay, so communication has some doing to it. It has some doing to it, and communication also has, you know, the how, the way of being involved in it. And in communication, it's not just that we're communicating. How we do it really does matter. It's common for us to think about communication in the way we express to others. But there's this other side of communication, which is a giving and a receiving, that I want to focus on here right now in principle number 2, and that is the first duty of love is to listen. And this image, which is such a beautiful image from the Ashes and Snow exhibit from many years ago, but this young man, you can see him leaning in with full presence, as if he could hear the sound of the ocean in the shell that's right in front of him. It's like such intent presence and attention towards the shell, the subject in front of him. This is the kind of listening that helps to build connection. Now, the principle or the practice is that we want to listen to connect, not to reject, not to deflect, not to direct, right? So we might illustrate what listening to connect isn't as a way to understand better what it is. So very common when we're listening to somebody to be thinking about what we want to say back to them. This is not listening to connect. Listening to connect is listening with the ears of your heart. It is showing up in kind, compassionate attention to the person in front of you. It is not worrying about what happened 5 minutes ago, 2 hours ago, anticipating what hasn't happened yet, and it's certainly not thinking about what you'd like to say in response, trying to find a way to get your point of view in sideways, right? So listening to connect is kind of a heart-to-heart connection with the person that's in front of you, as if the conversation really matters, okay? So you'd be surprised to see how this actually helps to grow your sense of vulnerability and your sense of connection. So let's see, we're on principle number 3. Okay, here's one. This is like we're laying it down, and that is our sense of connection, the same as our experience of relationships, doesn't reside in the other person, doesn't reside in the place or the thing. It resides inside of us, and that's the good news, is that we can take dominion over our experience when we find ourselves in choice here. So The experience of connection, it doesn't come from the other person, it comes from inside of you. So, we also know that outer reality reflects inner reality. So if we're having trouble connecting to somebody else in front of us, odds are we're actually struggling to feel connection to ourselves inside of us too. Think about our inner critic, right? It tends to be true that when we're really judgmental about ourselves, hold a perfection standard for ourselves, that it's much easier to project that onto people that we're with, is to have a really high bar of expectation and carry some judgment, okay? So Eckhart Tolle has a great statement that I think captures the essence of this, and that is that the secret to finding a deeper level in the other, so in this case a deeper experience of connection in the other, is finding a deeper level inside of yourself. Without finding it in yourself, you cannot see it in the other person. You wouldn't even recognize it if it was there, okay? So thank you, Eckhart, for that. And the practice that I want to suggest here is something that might sound familiar to you. If you're familiar with a gratitude practice, this is kind of along those lines, but there's a subtle difference that's quite powerful. Where in a gratitude practice, you're reflecting on your day and noticing things that you can feel grateful for that happened during the day. In this practice, as a way to really come into appreciation for yourself and compassion for yourself, is to think about, what am I appreciating about how I showed up today? Not how I'm appreciating my day, but how I'm appreciating how did I show up today. And if you can come up with a minimum of 3 things and go crazy if there are more than that, but really it's like catch yourself doing something right. And notice how when you are kind of having a kind and loving relationship with yourself, how much easier it is to have that same kind of experience with other people. Okay? So 14-day process, could be 32 days. It's just give yourself some time and some run rate and just notice what happens. All right, so principle number 4. The energies of, think about this, the energies of resistance, of fear, of anger, of right doing and wrong doing, disappointment, all of these things interfere with our experience of connection. And why is that? Well, connection is actually like energetically up there with loving, with creativity, with joy, with enthusiasm, with deep presence. And so it's almost like oil and water. You can't experience connection when we're judging other people, when we are critical of their point of view or their perspective. And so this notion of resistance, fear, and anger being incompatible in a way with connection. So I want to highlight for you that it's actually really normal for us to be looking for differences in points of view. We're socialized to recognize polarity. If you think about light and dark, it's actually much easier to understand what light is when we understand what the absence of light is. It's much more simple to understand cold when we also understand hot. Okay? So these are really normal comparisons that help us get relative understanding, and it can turn into a continuum of attachment when we start to translate that into a duality where there's my point of view and your point of view. There's what I think is right and what I think is wrong, what's good and what's bad. So again, this is a continuum of, I call it the goal line, but it's a perspective of attachment that can happen. And there's not much connection when we're at odds with a point of view that's different from ours. It's not easy to feel connected. So nonviolent communication would actually suggest if you lift above the detail, because it might be at the detail you don't agree, lift above the detail and find a place where you share some common ground. So what's an example of that? Well, we might all be able to agree that we'd love to leave behind a planet that is healthy and well and vibrant for the generations that come behind us, those that are going to ride on our shoulders. So we might be able to agree with that, but we might not have an agreement about global warming, yes or no, political this, yes or no, and what that does, the implications of that to our perspective, our shared perspective about wanting the planet to be a better place. So in this practice, this is about entering into this third dimension, which I like to call the soul line, it is a perspective of altitude. And when you can get altitude on an exchange, on a situation, and find a glimmer of hope where you have a shared aspiration, and start the conversation from there and see what happens. Right? So that's actually what practice number 4 is. If you find yourself in a difficult situation, in an interaction where you're not in agreement with the other person, lift above the detail and find a common perspective and see what you can do to feel connected and actually make progress on the conversation, which is not easy to do when you're in disagreement. Okay, so we have just gone through 4 practices, lickety-split, right? Crisp and I'd like to just review them with you, kind of see them all in one place and see how they build on each other and how they can support you. And the 4 practices are, number 1, build the muscle of neutral observation. Become a witness of your own experience when you're in dialogue with someone else and catch yourself. There's a liminal space in between a stimulus and a response, and there's freedom in there to actually make a choice before you have a reaction. So with the neutral observation, right, you can become a witness inside of yourself and deepen your sense of connection. And then the second is to listen to connect. This is like really connect. See somebody through the eyes of the soul. Listen with the ears of your heart and really show up in presence with them. And see how that changes the way you feel even about the interaction. I guarantee you the other person, it's an act of profound healing to show up with somebody in that way. Third is to deepen your sense of self-connection. And remember, the practice is self-appreciation, right? And doing that on a regular basis. And then finally, let love guide you. Let love guide you. Not ego, not personality, but really tap into what is it from a soul level? What altitude can you bring to the interaction that will actually clear the way for something really beautiful to happen? Okay? Now, if you can't remember all 4, just a great simple guide is to say, in any instance, what would love do right now? What would love do in this where we're not agreeing with each other? How would love respond? And love is probably not going to bark. Love is not going to judge the other person. Love is not going to correct somebody because they have a point of view that's different from yours. So what would love do? And let that guide you. Okay? So these are 4 sound simple practices, and simple and easy are not necessarily the same thing. And so I appreciate your willingness to participate and listen and gather whatever gems are here for you. And if you'd like to continue this conversation and actually do it in an interactive way where you can explore more deeply what these principles might mean for you and how to work with them in your real precious life, stay tuned to the market page. There'll be some information for you about how to register for a follow-up completely complimentary session that we'll do on December 15th at 6 p.m. and everyone is welcome to come, and we'll explore this even further. And so, I want to say thank you so much for tuning in, and turn it back over. Do I need to go one more? There we go.
Oh, thank you so much. It's beautiful. I am doing that 14-day challenge with my family, my husband, and my 6-year-old. I see that being so powerful. So I appreciate you being here with us. Yes, you can follow Colette at illuminatedleadership.co. You can also find her and all of our beautiful partners on our Market Partner page. You can check out more details about her and her special offer. And we thank you for being with us.
Thank you.